There's something I need you to hear right at the start, and most men never do. If you're an older man trying to attract a younger woman, the biggest mistake isn't your age, your looks, or even your confidence. It's the energy you don't realize you're giving off in the first 10 seconds of interaction. And yes, women notice it instantly. If this sounds interesting to you, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Not because I'm asking you to, but because what we're talking about here can genuinely change the way you show up in relationships. And most men never learn this in their lifetime. Now listen closely. A lot of older men think flirting is about trying harder, being smoother, saying the right lines, or proving they still have it. But from a psychological point of view, attraction doesn't work that way, especially when there's an age gap. You're not competing with younger men, and that's the first shift you need to understand. Because the moment you start competing, you start overreaching. And overreaching creates something women pick up on very fast: tension that feels forced. Not dangerous, not exciting, just off. Younger women are not looking for a man who is trying to be younger than he is. That's actually one of the fastest ways to lose respect in their eyes without them even realizing why. What they respond to is something far more subtle: calm presence, emotional steadiness, a man who doesn't chase approval in the moment. But here's where most men get confused. Calm doesn't mean passive, and confidence doesn't mean loud. It means you're comfortable in your own frame. You're not adjusting your personality based on how she reacts in the first few seconds. You're not trying to win her attention. You're simply present. And presence is powerful in a way most men underestimate. Because when a younger woman meets an older man, she's unconsciously scanning for something very specific. Does this man feel grounded, or does he feel like he needs something from me? That question is answered before you even finish your first sentence. Now I want you to imagine something for a moment. Two men walk into the same room, same age gap, same situation. One is slightly rushing, trying to be interesting, trying to keep her engaged. The other is relaxed. He's not performing, he's just there, comfortable in silence, comfortable in conversation, not filling every gap with nervous energy. The difference in how they're perceived is not small, it's massive. And most men never realize that attraction often starts with what you are not doing. Not over-explaining, not over-pursuing, not over-proving. Because when a man removes that pressure from himself, something very interesting happens in the interaction. The woman feels space, and in that space, curiosity starts to grow naturally. But here's the deeper layer most people miss. You don't create attraction by trying to be chosen. You create it by being someone she slowly becomes interested in without feeling pushed. Let's go deeper into something most men completely overlook: your tone and timing. Because here's the truth: women don't just listen to what you say, they feel how you say it. And with younger women especially, this becomes even more sensitive when there's an age gap. Now I want you to imagine this. An older man approaches a younger woman and immediately tries to perform in conversation. He speaks a little faster than usual. He tries to be funny on command. He fills every silence like silence is dangerous. On the surface, it looks like confidence, but psychologically, it reads as urgency. And urgency is one of the fastest attraction killers. Because urgency tells her one thing without words: I need this to go well. And the moment she feels that, the dynamic shifts. She's no longer relaxed. She becomes observant. She starts evaluating instead of experiencing. Now compare that to a man who speaks a little slower. He doesn't rush his sentences. He doesn't jump to fill silence. He's not trying to force chemistry. That kind of man creates something very different in her mind. Emotional safety mixed with curiosity. And that combination is powerful. Because attraction isn't just excitement, it's also comfort with tension. The space between "I feel safe" and "I want to know more." Now let's talk about timing, because this is where older men actually have an advantage, if they use it correctly. You don't need to respond immediately to everything she says. You don't need to react instantly to every moment. A slight pause before you reply doesn't make you awkward, it makes you intentional. It shows that your words are chosen, not spilled. And younger women notice that difference even if they can't explain it logically. But here's where many men go wrong. They confuse silence with disinterest. So they panic, they overcompensate, they start adding extra words, extra energy, extra jokes. And what was originally a neutral, potentially interesting interaction turns into something that feels slightly unstable. Now let me be very clear about something important. You are not trying to impress her in the first minute. You are trying to establish a baseline. I am comfortable being myself, regardless of outcome. That's it. Because when she senses that you are not emotionally dependent on her reaction, her brain relaxes. And when the brain relaxes, curiosity becomes possible. And curiosity is where attraction starts to form. Another subtle point most men miss is this. Younger women are used to fast, noisy, overstimulated interactions. Social media, constant attention, quick validation loops. So when they meet a man who is slower, calmer, and more grounded, it feels different. Not in an obvious way, but in a noticeable one. And different stands out. But only if it feels authentic, not calculated. Because the moment your calmness feels like a technique, it loses power. This is why real confidence is never about doing more. It's about removing unnecessary behavior. No chasing energy, no proving energy, no performing energy, just steady presence. Now let's talk about something that almost every man gets wrong at some point. The difference between showing interest and chasing. On the surface, they can look very similar. You're talking, you're engaging, you're being attentive. But emotionally, they feel completely different to the woman you're interacting with. And she can tell the difference faster than you think. Interest feels light. It feels optional. It says, I enjoy talking to you, without needing anything in return right away. Chasing, on the other hand, feels heavy. It carries this subtle pressure of, I need you to like me back. And here's the part that might surprise you. Younger women are especially sensitive to this difference because they've experienced both. They've experienced men who give attention freely, and they've experienced men who try to secure attention as quickly as possible. And over time, they learn to recognize the emotional tone behind it. So when an older man starts leaning too far into pursuit, texting too much, complimenting too early, trying to lock in plans too quickly, it doesn't come across as confidence. It feels like urgency again. And urgency, as we talked about, quietly reduces attraction. Now, this doesn't mean you should act cold or distant. That's another common mistake. Pulling back too much can create confusion instead of curiosity. The balance is simple in theory, but it takes awareness. You show interest without attaching pressure to the outcome. For example, instead of overloading her with compliments about her appearance, you might make one simple, grounded observation. Something that feels natural in the moment, not exaggerated, not rehearsed. Because exaggerated compliments often sound like they're trying to achieve something. And when words feel like they have an agenda, people instinctively guard themselves. But when your words feel neutral, calm, and honest, they land differently. Another thing to understand is pacing. Attraction, especially across an age gap, doesn't grow well under pressure. It grows in space. That means you don't need to escalate every moment. You don't need to constantly push the interaction forward. Sometimes the most attractive thing you can do is allow the conversation to breathe. Let there be pauses. Let there be moments where nothing impressive is happening. Because those moments are where she starts forming her own internal experience of you. And that's important, because attraction isn't something you push onto someone. It's something they build internally based on how they feel around you. Now here's a subtle but powerful shift I want you to make. Instead of thinking, how do I keep her interested? Start asking yourself, does this interaction feel natural, or am I forcing it? That question alone can change everything. Because when you stop trying to control the outcome, your behavior becomes more grounded, more consistent, and more real. And real is rare. Especially in environments where most interactions feel rushed or performative. Now, one more thing before we move on. When you're talking to a younger woman, she's not just responding to your words, she's responding to how she feels in your presence over time. So if your energy stays steady, no sudden spikes of intensity, no emotional pressure, no overinvestment too early, you create a space where she can slowly lean in on her own. And that's the key. You don't pull her toward you, You give her a reason to step closer. There's a part of attraction most men never consciously think about, yet it shapes everything. Emotional control in small moments. Not big dramatic reactions, not life-changing decisions. I'm talking about the tiny, everyday moments where most people reveal who they really are. A slight delay in her reply, a small change in her tone, a moment where she doesn't respond the way you expected. And in those moments, a lot of men lose their balance without even realizing it. They get slightly anxious, they overthink, they adjust their behavior immediately to fix the situation. And that reaction, even if it's subtle, changes how they're perceived. Because emotional instability doesn't always show up as chaos. Sometimes it shows up as small, reactive adjustments in behavior. Now here's what younger women often pick up on with older men specifically. They're not just observing your confidence, they're observing your emotional predictability. Do you stay steady when things don't go your way? Or do you shift your energy based on her smallest reaction? That difference matters more than most men realize. Let's say you're in a conversation and she suddenly becomes a little quieter. A lot of men will immediately try to fill that gap. More words, more jokes, more effort. But emotionally grounded men do something different. They don't panic. They stay in the same state. They continue the interaction at the same pace. They don't treat silence like a problem that needs fixing. And this creates a very specific impression. This man is not easily shaken. Now, I want to be clear here. This is not about acting detached or cold. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about not letting your emotional state be controlled by small external shifts. Because attraction doesn't grow in unpredictability. It grows in stability, and stability creates trust, even in flirtation, especially in flirtation. Another important piece is what I call emotional self-checking. Most men don't notice how often they internally ask, "Am I doing okay?" during an interaction. That question sounds harmless, but it quietly shifts your focus from the present moment to self-evaluation. And when you're evaluating yourself mid-interaction, you're no longer fully present with her. You become slightly inside your own head, and presence is one of the strongest signals of attractiveness. Now, think about the opposite. A man who is simply engaged in the moment. He listens. He responds naturally. He's not tracking approval. He's not monitoring performance. He's just there. That kind of presence feels rare, and rarity stands out, especially to someone younger who may be used to more emotionally reactive or validation-seeking interactions. But here's something subtle you should understand. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't feel anything. It means your feelings don't instantly control your behavior. You can feel interest without rushing. You can feel attraction without chasing. You can feel curiosity without over-investing. That gap between feeling and action, that's where maturity shows. And in the context of flirting, that maturity is often what separates just another guy from someone she remembers. Because most people react, very few people regulate. Now I want to shift your attention to something most men completely underestimate. Presence. Not what you say, not how you dress, not even your opening line, but how you exist in a space before anything is even spoken. Because when an older man walks into a room and there's a younger woman present, a lot is already being registered in silence. And I don't mean in some mysterious or mystical way. I mean psychologically. She's noticing how you carry yourself when you're not performing for anyone. Are you scanning the room nervously? Are you immediately looking for attention? Or are you simply comfortable being where you are? That difference is loud without saying a word. Now here's something important to understand. Presence is not about being dominant or trying to look important. In fact, that often backfires, because forced dominance feels like compensation. Real presence is much quieter. It's the man who doesn't rush his movements, who doesn't constantly adjust himself for approval, who doesn't appear like he's waiting for something to happen. He's already comfortable in the moment as it is, and that comfort is visible. You might think women only notice bold, outgoing behavior, but younger women especially are also very sensitive to subtle emotional signals. They notice who is grounded and who is slightly unsettled. Now let's connect this to flirting. When you approach a younger woman from a place of grounded presence, your energy is already different before you even speak. You're not entering the interaction like you're stepping onto a stage. You're entering like you're simply including her in your moment. That shift alone changes everything, because it removes pressure from both sides. And pressure is what kills natural attraction early. Another important point here is how you occupy space socially. A man with strong presence doesn't try to dominate the conversation, but he also doesn't disappear in it. He contributes when he speaks. He listens when others speak. He's not overcompensating in either direction. There's balance, and balance feels emotionally safe. Now, I want to address something older men often worry about. They think younger women will automatically judge them based on age alone. But in reality, age is not the deciding factor in the first impression of attraction. Energy is. Specifically, whether your energy feels secure or insecure. Because insecurity often shows up in subtle ways. Over-explaining simple things, trying too hard to be funny, needing constant feedback, interrupting to stay relevant. And secure presence shows up differently. Comfortable pauses, natural pacing, no rush to prove anything. And the interesting thing is, secure presence often reads as confidence, even without traditional confident behaviors. Now let's make this practical. If you want to improve how you come across, don't start by changing your personality. Start by slowing down your internal urgency. Slow your speech slightly. Slow your reactions slightly. Slow your need to respond instantly. Not artificially, but intentionally relaxed. Because when your internal state slows down, your external presence follows. And people feel that shift instantly, even if they can't explain it. And here's the deeper truth behind all of this. Attraction doesn't come from trying to be impressive. It comes from being someone who doesn't need to be impressive to feel okay in their own skin. That is what creates curiosity. That is what creates attention without effort. And that is what makes younger women start to lean in naturally, instead of you having to pull them toward you. So let's bring everything together in a simple way, because if you've been paying attention, you've probably realized something important by now. Flirting, especially as an older man, is not about doing more. It's about removing the behaviors that quietly create pressure. And once that pressure is gone, your natural presence starts doing most of the work for you. Now, I want to give you a simple framework you can actually remember. Think of it like 3 layers. First, your internal state. Second, your interaction style. Third, your emotional pacing. Let's start with the first one, your internal state. Before you even speak to a younger woman, the most important question is not, what should I say? It's, am I trying to get something from this interaction? Because the moment there's neediness underneath your behavior, it leaks out in subtle ways. Not in obvious desperation, but in micro-adjustments. Over-talking, over-smiling, over-explaining. And she feels that tension before she understands it logically. But when your internal state is calm, when you're not trying to secure anything, you naturally become more grounded. You speak more clearly. You pause more naturally. You don't rush your identity into the conversation. Now the second layer, interaction style. This is where many men think flirting lives, but it's actually just one piece. Good interaction is not about saying perfect things. It's about saying normal things in a calm, steady way. You're not performing, you're engaging. You're not impressing, you're connecting. And you're not trying to escalate every moment emotionally. You let the conversation unfold instead of forcing it forward. That alone makes you stand out more than most men realize. Now the third layer, emotional pacing. This is the most subtle, but also the most powerful. Emotional pacing means you don't rush intimacy, you don't rush validation, you don't rush outcomes. You allow attraction to develop in its own time. And this is especially important with younger women, because rushing creates pressure, and pressure kills curiosity. When you slow your emotional investment, something interesting happens. You stay more centered, you observe more clearly, and you respond instead of react. And that shift changes how she experiences you. Now let's make this very practical. If you want to flirt in a way that feels natural and confident, here's what it really looks like in real life. You approach without urgency. You speak without over-explaining. You show interest without chasing. You create space instead of filling every silence. And you stay emotionally steady no matter how she responds in the moment. That's it. Nothing complicated, nothing exaggerated, nothing forced. Because real attraction doesn't come from trying to be the most exciting man in the room. It comes from being the most emotionally grounded man she interacts with. And here's the part most men don't hear often enough. You don't need to become someone else to do this. You just need to stop interfering with your natural calmness. Because underneath the overthinking, the pressure, and the self-doubt, there's usually already a more grounded version of you. And when that version leads your interactions, everything changes. She feels it, she responds differently, and the dynamic becomes lighter, more natural, and more real. Not because you forced attraction, but because you stopped blocking it. And that's where I'll leave you.